Hello, my name is Rayleigh Zantop Zimlinghouse, and I'm an Island School Teaching Fellow and one of the research assistants on the Silky Shark Ecology Project.
My name is Candace Fields. I'm a research assistant on the excerpt team at CEI.
And my name is Brendan Tolwar, also a researcher at CEI.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nate.
I'm Mariposa. I'm Veronica.
I'm Will.
I'm Peyton. I'm Cassie.
And as a research team, we have studied the horizontal and vertical movement behavior of silky sharks, Carcharodontis falciformis, in the Western Atlantic. Globally, 62.6% of all shark and ray species are threatened by extinction, which is the highest percentage out of all vertebrate groups studied to date. Climate change, habitat loss, and especially overfishing are the main extinction risks that are leading to population declines. An example of a shark under pressure by these extinction risks is the silky shark. The silky shark is a circumtropical coastal pelagic species that lives in waters from Massachusetts to southern Brazil. The silky shark is poorly studied in the Atlantic Ocean and is considered vulnerable by the IUCN Red List. This means that it has experienced population declines and is threatened by extinction, but there's not enough information on the species to understand how to manage the species properly. The silky shark is under a population decline of 46 to 98% and is the second highest accidentally caught shark in fisheries across the world.
One of the main reasons silky sharks have experienced such a major decline in the past few decades is because they're often associated with tuna around fads, where they are susceptible to being caught in seine nets. After being caught in a seine net, silky sharks suffer a 92% mortality rate. There is little to nothing known about the movement of silky sharks in the Atlantic. The only ocean-wide study to be documented took place over the course of 30 years, where fishermen deployed spaghetti tags into the muscle of silky sharks so that they could be identified after they were recaptured. So that's a spaghetti tag. This map represents every tag and recapture of the silky sharks that were tagged in that study. At the beginning of each arrow, was where the silky sharks were tagged, and at the end of each arrow is where the silky sharks were recaptured, giving us a straight line. But there's no information on where the silky sharks moved in between that, so the data is very limited. The only time satellite tags have been deployed on silky sharks in the Atlantic was in a study off the coast of Cuba, where 3 silky sharks were tagged for less than a month at a popular dive site. Here's where the tags were deployed, and here's where they popped off. So they were all very close towards southern Cuba.
Because there is such little information known about silky sharks, the objective of our research is to characterize the horizontal and vertical movements of silky sharks in the Western Atlantic to help inform fisheries management. In order to do this, we need to catch silky sharks. One of the methods that we use is longlining. When we longline, we will use 1,000 meters of rope with 70 to 75 hooks attached, and we will let that soak for up to 3 hours. Then we will haul it in to see if we caught anything. Longlining is illegal in the Bahamas, but with a special research permit, we are able to practice this kind of fishing. Another method that we use is targeted fishing. When we do this, we'll chum the waters around our boat to attract silkies, and then throw a buoy with hook attached into the water to try and catch it if we see one. Once we have caught a shark, we'll attach it parallel to the side of our boat to take measurements and samples. We try to use minimally invasive tagging and sampling procedures. Some of the samples that we take include fin, blood, and muscle. We take these to help determine diet based on stable isotope analysis. Once we have the samples, we will send them to a lab to be stored and analyzed.
When the sampling process is over, we will then tag the shark. This is a shark that we tagged about a month ago just south of Cape Eleuthera. We use 2 different tags to tag our sharks. We use a spaghetti tag and we use a PSAT tag. The spaghetti tag is used for identification purposes, and the PSAT tag collects data for us. We attach the PSAT tag by piercing a small hole through the cartilage of the dorsal fin, stringing monofilament through that hole, and then crimping it so that as the shark swims, it'll dangle behind it. The PSAT tag has 3 different sensors on it that collect data for us. It has a temperature sensor which will give us insight to its thermal preferences. It has a light sensor which will give us its estimated location based off of light levels, and a pressure sensor which will tell us its depth. Those measurements are taken once every 2 minutes for the duration of the time that the tag is attached. We set our tags to stay on for 8 months. So after 8 months, the tag will pop off, float up to the surface, and send a signal out to the nearest satellite with information on its coordinates and some data. That'll then get passed along to a company which will make that information available for us to access later on.
So far, we've caught 20 silky sharks in the Western Atlantic. Of the 20, 14 have been female, and they were 96 to 248 centimeters long. The males were 124 to 209 centimeters long, and the average was 143 centimeters, which is below the size of maturity, which tells us that we're catching mostly juveniles. This figure shows us data that was collected from a tag that recently popped off a shark, and it highlights where the shark spent most of its time. Temperature is on the x-axis and depth is on the y-axis, and most points fall between 23 and 27 degrees Celsius and 0 to 150 meters in depth. This tells us that the silky shark spent most of its time near the surface where the water is warmer. Because of this, we know that the silky shark is epipelagic, which puts it at risk of being caught as bycatch in tuna fisheries. We believe that the silky shark and tuna inhabit the same depth and temperature preference, which is why they're so frequently caught as bycatch and why the species has faced declines.
Of those 20 silky sharks that Will mentioned earlier, 10 were tagged off the coast of South Carolina. Those researchers are helping to contribute their data to our presentation today. As for the others, 1 was tagged off the Gulf of Mexico, 5 off of Eleuthera, 2 off San Salvador, 1 off Mayaguana, and 1 in Haitian waters. However, today we will just be focusing on the ones tagged off of Eleuthera. Here we have the original capture location for 1 silky shark in March of 2018. That shark was found to be a juvenile and thus tagged with a spaghetti tag. Then in April of this year, that shark was recaught and tagged with a satellite tag. 2 months later, that tag popped off, showing that the shark did not leave the Exuma Sound. This tag is the only tag analyzed thus far, and so more data on this animal will be presented soon. Earlier this year as well, 2 more juvenile animals were tagged. Then, 8 months later, those tags popped off. Those 8 months were the longest time a tag has ever been put on a silky shark in the Atlantic Ocean. Those tags were recently recovered, and thus data is not available yet, but should be available very soon. We were lucky enough to tag 1 silky shark earlier this semester. That tag should be on for about another 7 months. Here we have the horizontal movement data for that 1 silky shark that was originally tagged in March of 2018 and retagged in April of this year. The green dot here shows where the tag was deployed, and the red dot here shows where the tag popped off. Keeping in mind that this is in a 2-month period, it doesn't make sense that the graph shows the shark moving all over the Atlantic Ocean. The light-based geolocation data does not show a clear and distinct pattern. This leads us to believe that the shark did not leave the Exuma Sound. If it were to leave the Exuma Sound, it would look something more like this from a South Carolina silky shark. The calculated and the average locations line up to show that the shark left the United States and went into international waters where it may be susceptible to unregulated fisheries.
This study that we've been able to be a part of this semester is the first to be focusing on the long-term movements of silky sharks in the Western Atlantic Ocean. The horizontal movement data that we have collected so far has led us to believe that the Exuma Sound could potentially be a nursery for silky sharks. All of the silky sharks that we have caught off of Eleuthera have been juveniles, and the horizontal movement data from these juveniles has showed us that all of the silky sharks we have tagged have stayed here in this area. We've compared this movement data to the horizontal movement data of silky sharks of the same size that were tagged off the coast of South Carolina. The silky sharks that were tagged off the coast of South Carolina showed to have made much larger scale movements following the Gulf Stream out into the Western Atlantic Ocean. This is able to show us that there's something very unique about the habitat of the Exuma Sound, as the juvenile silky sharks that were tagged there chose to stay in this area for the duration of their tagging period. This is also very important to know because as the juveniles are staying in this area, we're able to know that they're protected, as the Bahamas has been a national shark sanctuary since 2011. This means that the capture and selling of sharks or shark products is prohibited, and longlining has also been banned since 1993. So the fact that the juveniles are staying here is a very good thing because we do know that they are protected. However, we believe that as these sharks mature, It is very likely that they will begin to make larger scale movements outside of this protected area and into open international waters. Because of this, we will now be shifting our study to tagging only adult silky sharks so that we're able to gather information on where these sharks are actually going. As these sharks move out into open international waters, they become much more susceptible to targeted fishing and bycatch, which leads to an increase in the mortality of silky sharks. Without information on the horizontal movement of where they're going, we're unable to implement conservation methods. But the information from this study has the power to help these conservation methods be implemented. In the future, we hope to begin communicating with lawmakers so that we can help to make this conservation possible. This is our literature cited, and we would also like to take a minute to acknowledge Brendan Talwar, Candace Fields, Rayleigh Zantop Zimlinghouse, Lauren Barnes, Olivia Bobritz, along with the entire excerpt team, the Cape Eleuthera Institute, the Island School, and FIU, because this would not be possible without them. We would now like to open up the floor for any questions. Yes?
How long does a silky shark live?
The question was, how long does a silky shark live?
We don't entirely know because there's very little information, but they mature at around 9 years, and then we don't know how long they can live. Yeah. Back there. Yeah.
What's the deepest depth of one of your tagged silky sharks, and what kind of data are we getting about that?
The question was, what's the deepest depth we've seen from our tags?
So the silky sharks tend to stay above 150 meters, but they do occasionally make deeper dives past 200 meters, and we believe that this is likely for feeding purposes as they want to get down to the larger fish. So it's able to tell us that they make those depths to get more food. Yes?
What happens to bycatch?
The question is, what happens to bycatch?
So if we were to catch a fish that wasn't a silky or just that wasn't a shark in general, we sample it. For example, earlier in the semester, we caught a mahi on the screen right now, and we took samples from it, and luckily it was in a very good condition, so we got to put it back into its natural environment. Yes?
So there's certain sharks that are kind of known as aggressive sharks. There's certain sharks, like a nurse shark, that's known as a more docile shark. Where does this shark fit into that kind of behavioral pattern? And one more, what kind of hooks do you guys use to catch them?
So the question was what kind of hooks we use to catch these sharks and how they behave if they're an aggressive species of shark.
Silky sharks aren't known to be very aggressive. Yeah, and we use circle hooks. It's just the least invasive way of catching them.
What size are they when they reach maturity at 9, 10 years old?
The question was, what size are they when they reach maturity?
They're about 220 centimeters or a little over 7 feet.
Why don't commercial fisheries just return the bycatch back into the water?
Why don't commercial fisheries just return the bycatch to the water?
They often do. Just most of the time, like 92% of the time, the sharks are dead when they throw them back in the water.
So people don't eat these sharks, though? This type of shark, they're not eating it at all?
The question was, do people eat these sharks?
So unfortunately, there's a cultural dish called shark fin soup. Basically, that is when the dorsal fin of the shark is taken off of the shark and then made into a soup. Silky sharks are one of the more prominent sharks in that group. So they're not eaten, their muscle isn't eaten, but their fins are used in that cuisine.